everybody. How is everyone doing? We are live on all social media platforms. First latte of the morning. Actually, only. I've reduced myself to one coffee a day. So, we are talking about the end of year special because it's a limited time event. However, today we are discussing it from the point of view of the investor, right? So we've had you guys piling in on the consultations. There are quite a few set up now. So if you guys are trying to get a consultation and you can't get one in the next couple of days, that's because we obviously weren't doing anything over the holiday. And so those days were blocked out. So everybody who tried to book a consultation over the holiday got pushed into the few days after it. So that would explain anyone's difficulty in trying to get a consultation like tomorrow or today. That might not be possible. But you should only have to go out like a couple days out, and you should be able to get one. So, what we have had so far has been a pretty even split between relocatees and folks that are not relocating and that are just doing some business work. And so we wanted to go ahead and get into the business work and explain how those folks get to take advantage of the end of year special. Slightly different, but in essence, it's the exact same procedure. Nothing changes with the price, right? So the price of the end of the year special is the same either way. But what happens with the folks who are taking investor advantage of the end of year special is that they're setting up their short-term rental or their vacation home business with this special same 1,600 square foot home. It's actually a little bigger than that. So same, house, 2-story, 1,600 square foot, same plot of land, still all by the beach, which is what really makes it possible, right? Had we chosen land that was out in the cut for this, instead of giving you premium land that's near the beach, then it might not have worked. But all of the plots of land for this particular special are near Diani Beach, so not just a beach, but a tourist beach, voted number one beach in all of Africa, not just Kenya, for about 5 or 6 years in a row now. So that also helps, obviously, for the business people. And so they get an Airbnb instead of a house setup. But the major difference is they have to get a investor permit, not a ordinary residency permit, right? If they don't have an investor permit, they're illegally working in Kenya. Well, they're illegally owning a business in Kenya, right? You can work without an investor permit, but then you need a work permit, which means you're an employee of a Kenyan company, right? So that's a whole different life. But they illegally own a business without a permit if they try to set something like that up and they don't have an investor permit. So that's the difference, is that the immigration pack that's included in the end of year special for those folks becomes an investor permit immigration instead of a resident permit immigration, which also means that it doesn't lead directly to dual citizenship, right? So you guys been following me long enough to know the different permit types. You know that the only two direct paths to dual citizenship are ordinary residency permit for 7 years, spousal dependent pass for 7 years. Those are the only two direct paths, right? So when they switch to the investor permit, it doesn't take dual citizenship off the table. It makes it a lot more difficult. Okay, doesn't take dual citizenship off the table. It just makes it a lot more difficult. Makes it really, really easy to get permanent residence. Okay, permanent residence. Permanent residence is a step up from ordinary residence or investor permit or even work permit, in that you never need a permit again. The permit is permanent, right? Not a citizen. Doesn't help your passport portfolio if you're doing that, right? Doesn't get you another passport, but it does allow you to come and go the same way a citizen would, per se, right? So it is a direct path. Everything, all the other permits that are not direct paths to citizenship are typically a direct path to permanent resident. The only one that's a question mark, because it's brand new and no one has gotten that far yet. So anyone who tells you that they know for a fact is full of shit, is the digital nomad permit. The digital nomad permit started this year. All right. When it launched, we did the first two, and those were a diplomat's kids. So that was a little easier. So just started this year. Nobody knows because nobody has had one for 7 years. Period. All right. So it might lead to permanent residency. It might lead to a situation where they said, you said you were a digital nomad. You don't get to stay here. Right? You stayed here for the maximum amount of time that the permit allows, which is 4 years. So you never even got the 7 years, and maybe they won't renew it after the 4 years. Maybe you'll have to change to a different type of permit. So we'll see what happens in 3 years when the permit's been out for 4 years, which would still not be 7 years. And then we'll see what happens 3 years after that, as far as whether or not they allow that to be a legal basis for permanent residence. We'll see. No one knows yet. All right. So that's the way that the permits work in general, right? So the folks that are coming through and they're doing it as an investor, typically they are in the real estate space, short-term, mid-term, long-term rentals. Okay. So that's number one. Beyond that, they know that they're kind of giving up their chance at dual citizenship as a direct path, right? Now, we have had some interesting things come up. It does cost more, right? It's a more expensive way to do it, but it's a valid way to do it, right? We had some people kill two birds with one stone, or double dip if you want to call it that. And here's how you do that, right? If you want to come in and you want the business aspect of this, you want the investor aspect of this, you want to own an Airbnb in a tourist area at an incredible price, you recognize the value of the special, and so you're like, okay, I want that. But at the same time, I want a passport portfolio. I want to be building my generational wealth in that way, and this is one of the countries that makes sense for me to have a passport to. Then, if you're married, we can double dip. So instead of, let's say the husband having an investor permit and then the wife being a dependent pass permit, or a dependent pass on his permit rather, which is a cheaper way to go, right? What we would do is they would actually go ahead and invest in the future they want, right? Because the only reason to do this is because they want the benefit out of it, right? So they would invest in the future they want, and they would both pay for a pass instead of attaching one to the other as a dependent. So husband might have the investor permit and is running the Airbnb business. Wife has an ordinary residency permit, which would allow her to become a dual citizen 7 years down the road, right? 7 years down the road, wife becomes a dual citizen. And then all of a sudden, husband with the investor permit says, oh, hold on, I've been married to a Kenyan for 7 years, right? Because now she's a Kenyan citizen. And he's been married to her for 7 years at least, because it took her 7 years to get there. So even if they just got married, he still qualifies, right? And so once she's a Kenyan, he can then say, hey, she's a Kenyan and we've been married for 7 years, right? And we can process the dual citizenship that way, right? So there are methods by which to kill two birds with one stone, which would allow them to work their business for those 7 years and then turn around and still qualify for dual citizenship. Important to note that she cannot do anything in those 7 years, right? Because part of The direct path to dual citizenship is proving that you don't need to work here for 7 years, right? So ordinary residents are not supposed to make any money in Kenya. That also simplifies your tax filings because if by statute you're not supposed to make any active income in Kenya, then by statute you have no tax liability. Even though you're a tax resident, they leave ordinary resident permits alone because by statute they're not supposed to actively make any income in Kenya. So you can just nil return all 7 years, and that's appropriate, right? And a nil return is essentially submitting a zeroed out tax return. It's appropriate because if you're following the law, as far as immigration case is concerned, you should have no active income. All right. So it essentially gives you a 7 year zero basis on your local tax. You still have to, file your U.S. tax if you're a U.S. citizen. But it gives you a zeroed out tax basis because you have a legal framework from which to say, of course, I'm like not claiming any taxes because you have declared that I can't actively work here. Right? So your money as an ordinary resident is supposed to be coming in from outside the country. So that is part of the qualification. Okay. Permit, you come in as definitely a work permit because if you're employed by a Kenyan company, so employee style taxes are being withheld from your check before you even get your check. So that is what it is, right? Hey, how's it going, Angwell? And so that is what it is. If you come in as an investor, which these people are that own the Airbnbs, right? They would expect to see at least corporate taxes, right? So they would expect to see your company pay taxes at the least. You obviously don't have to pay yourself, in which case you might not be paying taxes, but your company at the least would be paying taxes. All right, hold on. I see a couple questions. Let's see. Can you help me come to the U.S.? I think the other question is similar. Let me just see before I answer that. Will you in possession to help someone who wants to migrate to the U.S.? All right, so migrating to the U.S., not so much, right? We do work with local clients here. Number one, you'd have to be Kenyan, period. That's number one, because we only work with local folks at that level here. We do send some local folks to the U.S., but it's not an easy process. You have to be a business owner, period. All right. We don't do like regular visas to the U.S. We do what's called L1A visas to the U.S., which only apply to business people. And so we do assist in that sometimes. But you got to be a legit business person and you got to open up a branch of your business in the United States. Right. And you need an employee. Because the way an L1A works, and it does still work even with this Trump nonsense, but the way an L1A works is that an L1A is called an intercompany transfer visa. And so if you have an American company that's been in existence for a year, and which means you have to pay your taxes and you have to have an employee, and you're an owner of the company, you can transfer yourself as the owner to your American branch to manage your employee. That's why you have to have an employee. If you don't have an employee, then who are you managing? You can't go manage yourself, right? So you have to have an employee. You have to be in business for a year. You have to show a tax return. At the end of that, yes, you can transfer yourself and your entire family to the United States, and you can self-sponsor for a green card immediately. There's no waiting period and you don't need a sponsor. You can self-sponsor. So sometimes we do that, yes, but you have to be a business owner. So if you're not a business owner, then the answer to you is no. If you're a Kenyan business owner and you don't own a branch in the United States, it's going to take at least a year because you need 1 year. You need to pay your taxes in that year and you need to have an employee, right? So typically, the folks that take advantage of that are typically folks that are sending their kids to a U.S. college. And when you do that and you get the student visa for your kid, you have to put up all the money for the entire college up front, right? So if you got to put up all the money for the entire college up front, then what ends up happening is you have the money to do like an L1A. So instead of putting up that money towards that college, you can actually turn around and put up that money towards the business. And then if there's like a nephew or something, a family member, a lot of Kenyans who are in that position have family members who are already in America. And so you get a nephew or something, pay a minimum wage for the year and let them sit at your business in the US. And then after that tax filing, then we would set up the L1A process. You would transfer yourself and your entire family to the United States to manage that employee at that business. And then, depending on the type of filing, either the next day you can literally change status and to a green card, or the next year you can change status to a green card. So it's a pretty easy way to do it, but it's business owner only. So that's the answer to that. What are the gun rights that you know of there? Our firm has the ability to get you a firearms permit here. A lot of folks get them who are used to it. Like we got a lot of Texans who want to bring their guns and like, whatever, get firearms permits or whatever, and they'll carry for like a month. And then that'll be the end of that. It's just not the same vibe. I used to carry back home. I come from an open carry state. Pennsylvania is an open carry state. You need a concealed carry permit to open carry in the city of Philadelphia, and that's it. The rest of the state's open carry. And so I get it. Like I come from a state where I used to carry at all times, but I don't carry here. But some folks, like they haven't been here or whatever, they don't know the vibe, and they're so used to carrying that we will get them a carry permit when they first get out here, and they'll carry for a week or two, and then that's it. They'll just stop. In the history of free Kenya, right? Like since they've been released from British colonialism, I only know of one mass shooting, right? So yeah, in the entire history of the country, there's only been one. So it's not that type of. The same thing happens with homeschool. We get a bunch of clients that are like, I homeschool, I homeschool, I homeschool, and they get all this information on homeschooling. And yes, you can homeschool and you can do all of that. And within a year of them being here, their kids are in school. Because whatever it was that got them to homeschool in the first place doesn't exist here. So, you know. No, I already told you the only way that we do it. I'm not holding anything back. I don't have any companies that offer visas or anything like that. The only way we do it is the way I just told you. So yeah, firearm permits you can do if you'd like. Okay. I don't see. Let me check all of the live streams. All right. I don't see any. They're not cheap. I can tell you that. They're not cheap at all. Um, because it's an entire process. Because you're a foreigner. Like think about what you went through for your permit where you live now, right? And you were a citizen, right? So now you're a foreigner. They have to do international background checks. They have to do FBI. They have to do Interpol. They have to do, all of that stuff. Then they have to do your biometrics. Then they have to go to immigration and check, your immigration status. Because if you don't have qualified immigration status, you're not, so typically it's a package, right? Like typically people are coming, they're immigrating, and then we're going to do, their entire process as a package. So typically we could get all those background checks done in there. Are you living abroad, or are you living in Kenya as a Kenyan and have never lived abroad ever? Because if you've lived abroad at any point in time, they have to do a background check there. Yeah, so it essentially becomes the exact same thing. This is the only place where being a citizen doesn't help you. If you've lived abroad at any point in time, because if I don't know how, if you, since you live in America, I don't know how much you're up to Kenyan history, but if you remember, that one mass shooting I'm talking about was it was a terrorist thing, and it was someone who was radicalized abroad and then came back to Kenya and then shot up that mall, right? So it doesn't matter. If you've been abroad, they're going to look into it and make sure you've not, you know, gone to Lebanon and got radicalized, and now you're trying to come back and shoot up another mall. So, but yeah, definitely not. It's definitely not cheap. Comparatively, like it might be cheap. Like I remember we had a Japanese guy who came through that wanted one, and he said that it was incredibly cheap compared to Japan, right? But as an American, it seems expensive if you're an American who's like used to having a permit. Yeah, no, you know what? I remember having that kind of debate. I remember Dave Chappelle having, I think it was Dave Chappelle. He had a similar kind of debate where he was like, "Make the bullets $10,000 a bullet," you know. But yeah, no, I feel like it kind of should be more expensive in the United States, or there should be insurance that you have to pay every year or something like that. There should be something that makes it less of like anybody can do it type of situation, but that's neither here nor there. That's a lie for another day. But like I said, I myself used to, Philly is not the easiest place to get along in, so I myself used to carry all the time. Yeah, so it's an open carry state. Pennsylvania was the state that I came from, but there's a certification that you can get. It's called the Pennsylvania Act 235. So I actually paid and went and got certified. So it was different. Like I could work with a gun. You typically can't do that without a certification. So I actually went and got certified. I didn't just, oh, it's an open carry state. Let me just go get one even without a permit, which is crazy, right? Because you can do that in Pennsylvania. You just walk into a gun store with a driver's license and buy whatever you want. So, but yeah, it probably shouldn't be that simple. Expect to spend like, I don't, $8,500. Expect to spend somewhere in the neighborhood of 8,500, maybe even a little more. Maybe expect to spend 10,000. Yeah, and make sure that like it's not willy nilly. Like, oh, you really need it? Oh, okay, this is what it costs. You still need it? All right, you can have it. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where, you know, and you still got to go through the mental health and all of that stuff, which was part of the certification in Pennsylvania as well. If you get certified, you need to go through a mental health check. You need to go through a physical. You need to go through psych eval, and you need to go through a class. Yes, it is optional. Well, It's optional if you just want to carry. If you want to work with a firearm, so like if you want to be on like a money truck, or something like that, or you want to be like an armed guard, or even like there's something called Pennsylvania Act One, which is like what is it? It's like a campus police officer without going to like the actual police academy. Um, Dog catchers, like dog police, can also utilize it. Sheriffs? No, constables. Constables can also utilize it. Sheriffs have like Act 44, I think it is, where they go to their own police academy for sheriffs. So there's that. But Pennsylvania is real convoluted with that stuff. We're falling off topic here, but Pennsylvania has the most law enforcement agencies of any state. Most law enforcement certifications. So there's all these crazy different types of law enforcement. Most of them don't have investigatory powers, which means that they can't do what a cop can do. Um, so sheriffs fall into that category in Pennsylvania. I know, like in Florida, like sheriffs are the police. In Pennsylvania, with the exception of Allegheny County, because it's a county of the second class, so they have special sheriffs. Sheriffs are security guards. They're essentially bailiffs for the courthouse. And so we have all this crazy stuff with firearms and different law enforcement and different all of that. So it's definitely interesting coming from Pennsylvania and looking at firearms laws around the world. But again, I digress. To answer the question, yes, you can get a firearms permit here. You can conceal carry here. You need a ton of stuff. You need a ton of stuff. I can't even run down the list. You need a police clearance certificate. If you haven't been living here, whether you're Kenyan or not, then that clearance certificate will require clearances from the places that you have been living in. Um, you do need a physical. I don't think you need a psych eval, but you do need a physical. Um, there's essentially a court case. So you guys who are from New Jersey, you guys, it's the same kind of process as the New Jersey process. And the New Jersey process is for a SERPA license, which is like your armed guard license. You got to go to court and tell the judge, that you need to be an armed guard and in order to like work in New Jersey. So it's similar to that. It's similar to that process. So if you're from Jersey, you're very used to the process. Same thing as like a New Yorker. Like if you're a New Yorker with a firearms permit, like New York City, not upstate. Right? But if you're in the five boroughs and you're allowed to carry, then the process you went through is very similar to the process here. How many? Not many. Not many. I'd say if we relocate 40 people a year, maybe four of them get a permit. Not many. And then, like I said, within a month, they're not even carrying anymore. What was I saying about homeschool? It's the same thing with homeschooling. I don't know what motivates, right? Like we just had our first kid 21 months ago, right? So no school yet. Well, he has like a little preschool thing, but anyway, no real school yet. So I don't know exactly what motivates people to homeschool. I assume it's the treatment of the other kids in school, maybe, or perhaps fear of a Columbine type situation or a Sandy Hook type situation. Because most of the people who talk about it are Americans. I have never had a Canadian talk about we homeschool, we have to. Never. I've never had a Brit talk about we have to homeschool. Never. It's always Americans. We have Caribbean clients that come through as well. I've never had them be focused on homeschool ever. It's only Americans, right? So I don't know the specific motivations behind that, but I do know that every single person we bring over who was so caught up in homeschool as part of like what they needed to get figured out in order to make the migration, a year later their kids aren't homeschooled. So whatever it was that motivated them to homeschool, as a measure of protection for their kids, does not exist in this system. So still doesn't stop them from obsessing about it though until they get here. So like people bring up homeschool, I give them our internal statistics over the last 12 years, right? Of this as 100%. No one stays in homeschool after they've relocated, right? But until they get here, they're still I need the homeschool information. So I don't know. You know what I mean? I don't know what it is. I don't know what causes them to like stop. I don't know. You're homeschool now. Hey, I hear you. We get a lot of them. It's not like we don't have a bunch of clients that homeschool. They just stop once they get here. So it's not the same. Like I consistently get reports from Americans that there's like no bullying here. Now, locals will be like, that is bullshit. Like kids bully kids. The difference, I think, is that Americans are so cruel. American kids are so cruel, that what is like bullying here is considered like friendly banter, right? Like our culture in Black America specifically has a lot of friendly banter. We have words for it. It changes from region to region. Some people say snaps. Some people say you're busting. Some people, whatever. But we used to sit in circles in school and crack your mama jokes and da 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 da, and it was like, cool, we're all friends. You know what I mean? But if you came from another culture, you'd be like, oh my God, they're fighting every day. They're whatever. And so people get here, and the level of banter that like Kenyans have that they might consider to be bullying is so so watered down compared to what we do that it's like, oh, there's no bullying here at all. It's just, friendly banter amongst kinsmen. So it's just a different situation all the way around. And eventually people they're like, okay, just go to school. Like, I'm good. I'm not worried about anything. Have fun, go to school. So that's what it becomes. You can also, the other thing is, like for folks that are completely removed from, Columbine style danger in the school and, maybe even racial profiling in the schools, right? Because in my school, back in the United States when I was coming up, there were police officers in the school that racially profiled kids who were minors. You know what I mean? So your first interaction with a racist cop was at school, right? And so even if that's part of, the motivation or whatever, all of those things obviously disappear. But beyond that, if none of that is part of the most motivation, and the motivation is actually purely scholastic, you can afford a top level school here, which you might not be able to do in the US, right? We've had people who were making $250,000 a year could not afford a top level school in the US, right? We had an episode, maybe I'll do another one. We had an episode on the generational wealth side where we were breaking down the elite schools that are really successful generational wealth people send their kids to. And there are a couple in the United States, and they were like $250,000 a year in tuition, right? So if you're making $250,000 a year as a salary, yeah, you're crushing it. You're in the top like 15 percentile of the United States. But it would cost your entire salary to send your kid to a top level school, right? So no matter how good you're doing, it's really difficult to send your kid to an elite school, right, in the United States. And so here, you typically can afford to do that. So regardless of what the motivation was, whether it was just protect your kid from the bullshit, or I really need my kid to have a high level of, education, and since I can't afford it, I'm just going to give it to him myself at home. Either one of those scenarios are solved through the migration process. So I think that's why it's 100% that none of our clients maintain homeschooling when they get here, because no matter what their motivation really was, it's solved by moving. So there's that, but they all just go to school. Some of them go to international schools, which are those like elite schools. Some of them straight up go to public school, So you know, um, it's just a matter of being over here, I guess, and engaging with the school system. Yeah. I don't think they've ever thought about it either. I don't think it's something you think about. I think it's something you experience. So I don't think, because like I said, no matter what, we can have the conversation, but they're still going to be obsessed with what they're doing until they get here. I don't even think it is a talk it out type of situation. I think it's one of those things where, like, when you get here, when you experience what's going on, when you see the school systems for yourself, when you tour all of the parallel school systems that are happening at the same time. I feel like we kind of have the same thing in the United States. We just don't talk about it that way. But here, schools advertise themselves based on curriculum, right? Maybe there are some states where you can't break from the state curriculum. I don't know. But here, it'll say, like, okay, this is the British curriculum. This is the Canadian curriculum. This is the American curriculum. There's an American school right down the road from here. This is the French curriculum. This is the Chinese curriculum. This is the Dubai curriculum. And then, of course, there's a Kenyan curriculum, but it mirrors the British curriculum, unfortunately. So you can literally choose whatever curriculum and a lot of places have like two curriculums. So they'll have like British standard and Kenyan standard, or French standard and Kenyan standard, like in the same building. So you're able to choose the curriculum that you want your child to have, which is I would assume that's part of the charm of homeschooling. You can choose the curriculum, right? So that becomes an option here as well without the homeschooling. And so you still have the social interaction. The social interaction isn't too tough on the kid, which might be another motivation. And so it all just works out where, they eventually just stop with the homeschool thing because it's just inconvenient at that point. Like, if there's no actual bonus from you doing it versus sending the kid to school, then why would you not send the kid to school, right? So, yeah, that tends to be what happens. Yes, you can. Um, you can definitely start your own school. Way easier than starting a school anywhere in the West, that's for sure. But yeah, you can definitely start your own school. We're actually looking into doing that. You could, yeah, yeah. You could use the end of the year special to get started with that. Sure. Well, you could. You could instead dedicate the house as a schoolhouse, right? So you could do that. But the more important and the more kind of active side of that, if you're coming in as like a business investor and that's your ultimate goal, would be the bond laddering back into the organization, right? So let's say you do have it in your head that you want to create a school, right? Let's say you want a Pan African curriculum or just an Afrocentric curriculum or something, right? Because there's this British curriculum, there's American curriculum, there's Canadian curriculum. There is no African curriculum. Don't get me started, right? So let's say that that's your goal, right? But it's going to take you a couple years to do it. Okay, you could definitely use the end of year, the end of year special. If you do an investor permit, part of the requirement of an investor permit is a local company. So now all of a sudden a local company is part of your package because it's a requirement of the investor permit. So that local company can absolutely be a school, right? And then the bond ladders would pay back into whatever you want, either your trust, your company, or yourself, right? So in this situation, you'd probably want it to be the trust, and then the trust should own the school, right? Which that makes perfect sense because as a school, you're going to get a tax exempt status in the future anyway, right? So You let the trust own the school, and you let the trust own the bond ladder. And then all of the profits from all the proceeds and the passive income from the bond ladder would go right back into the trust and then be invested by the trust, right? So they'd be invested and they'd keep working. So if it takes you 5 years to build the school, all 5 years you've been getting passive investment income every single month because you have the bond ladder, right? Whereas most people, they're losing money slowly when they start something like this because they're bootstrapping it, right? So they're putting all their money in at first. Maybe they're looking for investors. Maybe they're looking for like-minded people. Maybe they're looking for group economics. And as they go on, it keeps draining their personal pocket. If you utilize like our end of year special and do it that way, it's paying itself, and that money is growing every single month without you putting a single dime in. You can just walk away from it, and it's getting richer and richer and richer without you. So that's the intelligence of utilizing, the bond ladder that's included in the end of year special, even for a project. So if you've ever bootstrapped anything, then you know the benefit of the thing that you created paying itself instantaneously from day one versus your pockets keep on getting emptier and emptier and emptier while you're trying to build your business, baby. And I bootstrapped dozens of businesses, most of which failed, right? So if you're an entrepreneur, you understand the struggle. But most of your businesses fail. So you just got to fail forward. I don't know anyone who doesn't have a 3-to-1 ratio of failed businesses to successful businesses. It's kind of like marriage, right? You should have more exes than spouses, right? That's the natural way things should work, right? So you will have more failed, businesses than successful businesses. Well, that question goes back to what I just said, right? Can you finance the business, like get bank financing locally in Kenya? Yes, but why? Right? Because what? You will have more failed businesses than successful businesses, right? If not, you are a extreme outlier. You are the exception that proves the rule, right? And so you will have more failed businesses, right, than successful businesses. So why would you get your financing in Kenya when you could get your financing in your home country, especially if your home country is the United States? You can get your financing there. And if this becomes one of those businesses that fails, the United States already has a mechanism for that. It's called corporate bankruptcy, right? Typically Chapter 11, but it's corporate bankruptcy, right? So there's bankruptcy that's completely set up for a real business that failed, because so many of them do, but businesses are so important to the economy that there's a safety net there. So why would you give up that safety net to, try and get financing elsewhere? So if you're coming from, the US, Canada, or the UK, it makes all the sense in the world to get your financing there. Take your shot at business, here, and if it fails, you flip the reset switch, and then you're still allowed to like live here. You still have a permit, you know what I mean? So a lot of folks, they'll flip the reset switch, and then they'll come and just stay here until their credit resets. And by the time their credit resets, they qualify for something. They either qualify for dual citizenship or they qualify for permanent residence, right? Because it typically takes about 7 years for the credit to reset. Sometimes 10, but typically 7. And so by then, it also takes 7 years for you to get a permanent status, right? Business is also easier here because it's not as sophisticated, right? I can advertise to the entire country for a tenth of the cost of advertising to Atlanta, right? So it's way easier here to do marketing. It's way easier here, to do business in general, than it is in Canada or the United States. I've never marketed in the UK, so I can't speak to that, but I'm pretty sure it's easier. Well, yeah, I mean, if you're a business person, right? We're talking about business people this live. If you're a business person, then you have to be thinking strategically. If you're not thinking strategically, you're new or you're really bad at business, right? So it has to be a strategic process, not the easiest process. Strategic process, which might be the hardest process, but it has to be the one that protects you the most. Yeah, there really isn't. When people ask that all the time, um, my response to that typically is work on business mindset, right? Because there really isn't one. So to be like, hey, what's the best business for a foreigner that doesn't even, it doesn't even make sense from an entrepreneur mindset, right? Now, are there gaps in the market? Which markets have the greatest gaps? Okay, we can get into that, but that still doesn't make those gaps, better to be filled by a foreigner. You know what I mean? So there really is no answer to that question because I think the question starts with a false premise, right? So like, what businesses have the best margins? That's a legitimate business question. You know what I mean? Which businesses has the lowest, entry points or the lowest barriers to entry? That's a legitimate business question, right? But what's really easy for me to do as a foreigner? Bill Gates is a foreigner. If it's easy, just because you're a foreigner, you think you're going to get it, not him. You know what I mean? You don't think his family office is looking for ways all over the world to make more money? And if there's an easy way for foreigners to do it, you don't think those guys ate that up, right? So it's not about if you're thinking easy, the entrepreneur mindset's probably not there. Building a business is literally the hardest thing that you're probably ever going to do in your life. So anytime I see questions like that, I feel like if I softball the answer, I'm setting you up for failure. There's always go work on your mindset, whether you want to hear that or not. But that's the answer that's going to set you up for success. Oh no, 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 absolutely. You're most welcome. It's tough. 'Cause how do you know what you don't know? You know what I mean? You don't. So it is tough. And really, the best way to do it is just throw yourself out there. You know what I mean? Throw yourself out there and fail forward. You know, and hey, there's a chance that you might not, fail. But if you do, have the right mindset about it and just fail forward. And it's all those failures that teach you everything you need to know to be successful. Yeah, I mean it's up to you. It's your priorities. Is it expensive to fail forward? Yep. Yep. Anybody gonna sit up here and lie to you? You're gonna lose a lot of money. But when you hit, is it worth it? Yep. When you see that first $1 million in your bank account, it's definitely it's definitely worth it, right? When your wife ain't got to worry about nothing, your kids ain't got to worry about nothing, definitely worth it. But it's gonna cost you to get there. Definitely gonna cost you to get there. Well, it's the difference. So for an entrepreneur is not a business owner, right? Or they're not synonymous, rather. All entrepreneurs do own businesses. Not all business owners are entrepreneurs, but people use the word interchangeably, right? And so for an entrepreneur, it's all or nothing essentially. You know, what's the difference? The difference is the definition. Go look up the definition, right? So a business owner is someone who owns a business. Full stop. That's the definition of a business owner, right? An entrepreneur is someone who has an extraordinary financial risk in a business, right? Not an ordinary financial risk, an extraordinary financial risk in a business, not just an extraordinary risk. It has to be financial, right? So if you lose as an entrepreneur, you're homeless. If you can lose your business and not be homeless, you're a business owner, right? So if, for example, there was this bakery called Keller's, right, back in the old neighborhood. Keller's Bakery was a guy who was an entrepreneur. He risked everything to open this bakery. He sent his kids to Harvard. Kid went to Harvard, became a lawyer. Kid's a successful lawyer in town. You know, so now there's Keller's Law Firm and Keller's Bakery, and it's the son and the father. Father dies, okay, which we all do, right? So Father's Day comes, son inherits the bakery. Son makes $1 million a year as a lawyer. If the bakery goes under, son could care less. It does not affect his pocket. He's a business owner, right? For that bakery. Now, maybe for the law firm, he's not a business owner. Maybe for the law firm, he's an entrepreneur, right? So you can be both at the same time. But for this bakery that he just inherited, he's a business owner. He has no extraordinary financial risk in that business venture. If that business goes under, so what? It just goes under. I still make $1 million a year over here. Doesn't matter, right? So an entrepreneur, that thing goes under, you're done, and you got to dig yourself out of the bottom, right? So when I started as an entrepreneur, which most people do, and that business failed, I was literally homeless. I had to dig myself out of the bottom, right? We had another business with entrepreneur, had to put up the house, had to put and lost it, right? Had to dig myself back out from the bottom. Once you become a business owner, if the business fails, you don't really care. You just go start another business if you feel like it. Maybe you don't start another business at all. Like it doesn't matter anymore, right? Which is the beauty of these systems, right? Especially this end of year special system. One of the beauties of the system is you get the bond ladder. So right from the jump, you have passive income coming in that supports you, and you're not particularly concerned as to whether or not those ventures succeed or not, because it's almost like a pension. You just have guaranteed passive income coming to you. Now, you still got to be smart with it, right? Because you didn't get it via compounding, so it's not going to outlast you, right? So that's a very important distinction. But you get 10 years to figure it out. If you can't figure it out in 10 years, not needing to worry about money, you can't figure it out, right? So that's a position that puts you in a position I wish I was put in when I first started. But yeah, they are not the same thing. Well, I'm happy you looked up the definition and confirmed it. Not that I didn't believe you. Listen, you don't know me from a can of paint. It's all good. How does the special? Because a component of the special is a bond ladder, right? So what's a bond ladder? A bond ladder is a sequence of bond ownership that makes sure that the bond coupon, which is the return on investment, the ROI of a bond, pays you every month, and hopefully pays you something significant every month, right? So by either immigrating or having a business entity formed in this different jurisdiction where money works a bit differently, it allows you to be in a position where you can, afford a bond ladder that can either support that business on its own without needing any help from you at all. So you create a business and never have to pay into it again, which is miraculous. Or if you're immigrating, you're able to immigrate and not have to work in order to cover your basic, bills and basic income type of situation in that place that you immigrated to, which is also equally miraculous, right? So the thing that allows that to function right now are the extraordinary rates of return on bonds currently, right? Like it's like right now there's one that's 14% that's available right now. Maybe the auction just closed actually, but this month's bond was, one of them was 14%, the other one was 12, right? So 14% on a bond when you get 10% on the S&P 500 is incredible, right? And so because of those rates, right now it's viable. It will not be viable for long, which is why the special expires in February, right? Because those interest rates won't hold forever. But as long as you get into, that situation while those interest rates hold, you're good to go. That particular bond, by the way, is 21 years. It's 21.8 years until the bond is done. So for the next 21 years, every year it's 14.188% every year for the next 14 years, guaranteed by the government. Okay. So that's what's making it possible right now. You have a U.S. Treasury bond at 7%. Yeah, yeah, that's a U.S. bond. You're absolutely right. Yep, that's a good bond too. I know some people who got 4%. They do. Yeah, they do. Yeah, like Vanguard is invested, BlackRock is invested. Yep, they do. We've even had folks who are closer to the institutional side of investors. They own like really big companies, and they took out loans to buy the bonds here. And even with the fluctuation in currency, right? Like a lot of people took out U.S. loans to buy the 18.46% infrastructure bond last February, right? And so that bond paying 18.46% as an infrastructure bond means it's tax exempt on this side. So you get all 18.46%. So even with fluctuations in currency, you're still getting 15% tax free easy. So they took out loans at 7% in the US to buy the bond that's going to get them at least 15%, and pay that loan and then make them an 8% profit, right? So, you know, they are. They're definitely engaged. Like if you Google 18.46% Kenyan infrastructure bond, the first result is like Wall Street Journal. It's not like the Kenyan Times. You know what I mean? So they absolutely are investing in it. You just haven't heard about it because they tell the general public about things after they're done. Like as soon as these bonds go back to normal, you'll hear all about it in the Financial Times. You'll see it'll be everywhere when you can no longer benefit from it. No one knows. Anyone who answers that question with anything other than no one knows is full of shit. I can't tell you when the interest rates are going to go back down. If I could, I'd be a billionaire. No one knows. That's why the markets are the markets. So is there a 20-year bond still available? Let me check. There, we can check together. I'll let you check right along with me. Let me see what's what with this bond. Okay, when does it say? All right, so the period of sale for this bond is now. Remember, they do dates differently. If you're not on TikTok, you can't see what I'm talking about. I can turn it on for YouTube. I don't know how well you're gonna see it though, but I'll go ahead and put it up for you guys. And then I'll break down what I was about to say. Is that it? Yes. Okay. So you can see there right above my head. You can't. It says period of sale over here because YouTube's ridiculous. But you can see it as 9, 12, 25. Remember, internationally, the date is first, not the month. So that's December 9th. 9/12 is December 9th, right? So December 9th until January 7th, 2026 is the period of sale. All right. Can you see that? So that's the period of sale for this particular bond. So you see it's 14.1880%. There's a 10% withholding tax. It's 21.8 years, right? So you can see that according to the government prospectus, they're selling it between the 12th or the 9th of December and the 7th of January. Okay. And then the settlement date is the 12th of January this coming year, right? So it is still available right now. The issue is it takes time to get a central bank account, right? Which is why. So when we tell people hurry up, they think we're pushing them and we're trying to rush them to buy stuff, right? It's not. It's because this stuff, there are timing, concerns in this stuff because the government runs everything. It's a government bond, right? So sometimes your immigration status has to be updated in the system. And then after your immigration status is updated in the system, we get your tax, PIN number. And then after we get your tax PIN number, we then have to apply to the Central Bank of Kenya for a CSD account, right? And then we get approved for the CSD account. And then we can purchase bonds like in your name. So people hesitate and hesitate and hesitate. And then something good like this pops out and they're like, ooh, can I get it? And it's like, no. You don't have enough time to open the account in order to get it, right? And then maybe it's the best bond that launches the entire year, and they're salty, but they've been listening to us for 3-4 months, and we've been telling them like, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up, for 3-4 months, and then that killer bond drops, and they can't get it, right? So this month is like awesome because if you look at the other bond, there's always two available. If you look at the other bond, it's 13 years. Typically, the smaller bond is only like 5 years, so it's not necessarily viable to the plan, right? But if you look at this other bond, it's 12.9% if we're going to round up, but it's 13 years, right? So it's over 10 years. So a lot of folks have bought both of these bonds. A lot of folks who are already onboarded this month, they bought both bonds because of the timing on them, right? So, which isn't normal. Typically, there's one like 20-year bond, and then there's like a 5-year bond, and then everybody's like, well, I don't want the 5-year bond, so just give me the 21, and we go from there. But this month in particular, and I think it's probably their holiday present, to the bond market. But this month gave two very long bonds all in the same auction. So, is it still available? Yes. Can you purchase it? Definitely not through a trust. Definitely can't get the trust set up in time. In your own name, maybe we can get the CSD account authorized before the end of this auction. Maybe. It would be pretty damn tight. And that's also why the special ends in February, because if we wait too long, then the setup timing would go all the way to like June, July, and now if it gets to July, there's not even 6 months left in the year. So how are we going to get you the 6 bonds? You know what I mean, and fulfill that obligation, and there's not even 6 months left. All right, so that's why it's limited. The land also limits it as well. So there's only so many plots of land available, which land and home construction is also part of the special. So you can get bond laddering on its own, though. Yes, the answer to that is yes. So that's just limited to you can start a bond ladder at any time, but for the purpose of the special, it'll end in February because for the purpose of the special, we're keeping our targets, which the targets are at least 10% ROI, right? And at least 10 years. After February, we may have to adjust that because the bonds will start going back to normal. So we may have to be like, all right, now it's 9%, you know, probably still 10 years, but the ROI might have to go down. Once it gets to like 8 or 7, it's not even viable anymore. We'll probably abandon it at that point. As far as it being a situation where you don't have to work anymore and now you can live off of passive income, right? For folks who were just supplementing their income, it'll still be viable for them. And that's going to be a matter of their risk tolerance, because it's still going to be viable for the people who like, hey, I got a low risk tolerance. I really don't want to lose money. Like, those people, it's always going to be viable, even though they're making less than they could have made somewhere else. There's less risk also. And so some people, they absorb, that opportunity cost by there being less risk, right? But currently, you're getting the best of both worlds until it resets. You're getting the best of both worlds. All right. Did that answer your question with the showing you the prospectus there? Henrock? Awesome. All right, I'm going to get rid of the prospectus now, unless anybody else has it. I'll leave it up for a second. If anybody else has a question on it, go ahead and ask it now while the prospectus is up. And then if not, I'll go ahead and get that out of my face here. You guys on Fanbase and Facebook, sorry, there's no way for me to show you the prospectus on the screen. All right, looks like no one else has a question on the prospectus. The prospectus says 25 years, you said 21. Yeah, you just got to read a little better. Look at the second line that says tenor, and look at the first line that says prospectus for what? Reopened 20 and 25-year fixed coupon treasury bonds, reopened. And what does the tenor say? It says 20 years, but there's 13.2 years left to maturity, and 25 years, but there's 21.8 years left to maturity. Just got to read the whole thing, that's all. Yes, it is possible that old bonds can reopen, and yes, they do keep the same rate of ROI or coupon payment rate, right? In bonds, it's not typically referred to as ROI; it's referred to as a coupon payment. But there's no way to know when and which. So you can sit around trying to wait for the 18.46% infrastructure bond to reopen, and it may never reopen. Or it might reopen 3 times, right? So no. Oh, that's a good question. Good question. No, you don't get 2 separate kind of tranches of the same bond. So let's say you already own whatever, a million of FXD1 2022 025, and it reopens like it is right now. Right now it's reopened. So let's say you got it when it first came out, which was in 2022. Okay. and it reopened now and you buy it again, your amount of the bond from 2022 will just be bigger when you look at your dashboard. You won't have two line items, right? Just however much you buy now will be added to what you already bought. So that's the way they do that. That's a good question, though. No one's actually ever asked that. But that's the way it looks in your portal. Any other questions about the prospectus from the government before I take it down? I think I answered all the questions so far about it. If there's any other question, now is the time, or I'll just drop this thing and we'll go back to our conversation. Not really, because you can't have your cake and eat it too. So if you're living off of it, then you're not getting the compounding effect. So you can't do both the generational wealth and your either your business runway strategy or your personal runway strategy at the same time, unless you have multiple ladders. Yeah, I don't know what that means, Bill. Okay, bonds for other country. I don't know what that means. Are you saying is it okay to own bonds from other countries? As long as that country sells to you, it's okay, right? Like some countries you can't buy bonds directly like this, right? So if that's what you're asking, then yeah, as long as you can buy it, then it's okay to own it. But I don't know if that's what you're asking. All right, looks like we don't have any more questions on this prospectus, so I'm just gonna drop it. Okay. You can still ask questions, of course, but no need to have it up. I think it confuses TikTok as well. 'Cause sometimes, like, TikTok thinks it's recorded if I leave stuff like that up too long. All right. Still waiting for your clarification there, Bill. If you want one, or if I answered your question, just let me know. You mentioned the runway strategy. Well, yeah, the runway strategy is simply to use the bond coupon payments as your runway, right? So if you've ever run a business before, you probably bootstrapped it at first, and then so every month until that business started making money, you were losing money, right? The money was coming out of your pocket to keep that business going, probably for the first year, if not longer, right? But if you have these bonds in place and they're paying you every single month, then the payments from the bond get to be the runway for the business, right? And if the business fails in 5 years, the bonds are paying for 10 years, right? So even if the business fails in 5 years, you actually have money coming in that you can start a new business with, and again, not have to worry about the payments for another 5 years, right? So that's the runway strategy. It's pretty simple. Could you just do the bond without the ladder strategy is the bonds. So you couldn't do the bonds. I mean, unless you wanted to buy an individual bond, but that wouldn't be a strategy. It wouldn't get you the money you needed, and you would only get two payments a year. Each bond pays out twice, once every 6 months. So laddering is the strategic method of you choosing bonds that have different payout dates so that every month you're getting a payment off of six bonds. So you're getting paid 12 months off of six bonds. That's what laddering is. So, oh, you meant can you do the bond laddering without the special? Yes. Yes, yes, yes. And so for people who are we have some clients that came in, and so they're not part of the holiday special, of course, obviously, but they already owned Airbnbs out here, or they're building one now, and they had money kind of like set to the side as runway. Like that's what business owners do. Like they have a runway. I see you, Bill. I'll answer that just now. So they have like a runway, and that runway covers the business until the business can cover itself. That's what runway is, right? And so they're like, well, wait a minute. Can I just take the runway, get the bonds, and then eventually the bonds produce more money than than the initial runway. Plus, I still have the runway money. That's the other thing with the bonds, right? So when you buy a stock, you pay, I don't know, let's just say you paid $100 for the one share, right? And then that share goes down. The initial $100, right? Your initial capital is lost in the degradation of that share. When you do bonds, your initial capital is returned to you, right? So the initial capital that you threw in is returned to you either at the amortization points of the bond or at the maturity of the bond. That's why there's a maturity, right? A lot of people will get confused like, well, the maturity says 20 years. What are you talking about getting paid every month? Because the payments come every 6 months and you got six of them, so you get paid every month. But your principal comes back in 20 years, right? So at the end of the 20 years, you either get your entire principal back or you get what's left if there was an amortization. The amortization means they give you a little bit of your principal like at different points during the bond. So if it's a 10-year bond, maybe 5 years in, you get half back. And then, 3 more years in, you get, a little more than half. So if, let's say you put in 1 million. At 5 years in, you get 500,000 back. And then at 3 years past that, you get 300,000 back. Now remember, that's local currency. 1 million in local currency, you can consider it like 10 grand, right? It's less than that, but just for easy math, you can consider it 10 grand, right? So for every 10 grand, you're getting 1 million, right? So that's the way that that works. I want to know if it's advisable to buy bonds from other African countries. Well, I mean, you need prospectus on those countries, and it depends on whether or not. See, in these situations, our clients are either immigrating here, or they're opening a business here, or they're building generational wealth in a offshore generational wealth trust for their kids or grandkids here, right? So because of that, the entire formula and strategy is based off of the tax structure of the offshore generational wealth trust here, which is amazing. The ability for those trusts to pay that money into a business that it owns for the business individuals that are doing business here, right? Or for the people who are migrating here, the cost of living, and can the ROI of the bonds actually make it so that you never have to work again and you can live off of the bond payments here, right? So those factors would have to be part of the analysis to whether you could do this in Sierra Leone or whether you could do this in Egypt or whether you could do this wherever, right? So if you're looking at another African country, you have to do your due diligence in that country and figure out whether or not it makes sense, to initiate and execute this particular strategy in those countries. There are countries that have higher coupon rate payments, so higher ROI, right? Like there are bonds like in Nigeria, for example, that are 27%, right? But the cost of living in Nigeria isn't the same thing as the cost of living here, so you still couldn't take that bond at 27% and live off of it like you could here without having to work again. The other thing is Nigeria, last I checked, doesn't offer the same access to the bonds. So you don't really get the 27% because you can't access the bond directly. Here you can. So there, you're paying a bunch of brokerage fees and you're paying a bunch of performance fees and you're paying a bunch of bank fees through that brokerage. So you might effectively get less percentage here, than you are percentage in Nigeria than you would here because of all those fees you have to pay in the middle. So you have to do your due diligence and figure out, whether it makes sense or not. Like we've done due diligence for our clients here where we operate, but we couldn't answer for the other 53 countries on the continent, unfortunately. Everybody, okay, good. Yeah, no, I'm happy that that makes sense to you. Sometimes it clicks. When it clicks, you're off to the races. There's foreign exchange only if you're repatriating the money, right? So if you're trying to like finance yourself in like the US, then the exchange rate might matter, but it doesn't matter if you're operating here. Typically not. Typically we don't have a whole lot of repatriators, because it doesn't. I mean, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to do that. It makes more sense, even if you are going to repatriate, you do get some of that with generational wealth trust funds, but they let it compound for a decade or so, right? So even if they are going to repatriate it, then they let it compound for a while and then repatriate it later, right? So your generational wealth folks, they might let it compound for 30 years, and then it's up to their kids whether their kids want to come live here or not. They don't have to. They can definitely have those distributions made to a U.S. bank account, right? And at that point, obviously the exchange rate's going to matter, and whatever tax laws are in existence in 30 years from now are going to matter as well. So yeah, those are the people who mostly do it. But typically, people aren't doing it for like monthly income to stay in the United States, but try to run a bond ladder out here because it goes back, right? So like you're putting up $10,000, you're getting $1 million in local currency value, right? Or a million shillings or whatever, right? A million local currency units. So when you send it backwards, it does the opposite, right? So here you're getting 50,000 units worth of spending power. You send it back, it's going to be $400 worth of spending power, which is nothing, right? So here you could, effectively like pay your rent, at that 50,000 mark, possibly easily depending on where you're living, right? Whereas you send it back to the United States, that $400 isn't paying for nothing, right? So you're definitely not paying for your apartment with no $400. You can get an apartment at the beach here for the 50,000 local units. So it spends differently. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to try and repatriate it, back and try to live off of it in America. Right, at least not instantaneously. If you let it compound for 30 years, well, now it's no longer $400. Now it's 400,000, right? So that's a whole different ball game. But yeah, you don't want to do that. Hey, what's going on, George? How are you, man? Yeah, so 50,000, like I said, 50,000, Kenyan shillings, you can definitely like pay your rent with that or whatever. But typically for us, that's why we have the house included. So if you own your own house, you can upgrade to owning your own car as well. But if you own your own house and all of that, 50,000 covers everything, covers all your local bills, all your everything. So now you don't have to work at all. Now you're getting the payments from the government every month, as a return on investment from the bonds that you bought, and that literally covers you for the entire month. So we just did our end of year report with some of those clients. Let me show you what that looks like. Yeah. So this is what the clients made from last year. January was the weakest bond that they got. The name of the bond is there. The gross payout for January was 60,000. They got 54,000 in their bank account, so above 50, which is our target. February was that big boy infrastructure bond that's tax exempt, right? So they got 92,350 in the payout, zero taxes. So they got 92,350 in their bank account. March, it was an 80,000 payout. There was 8,000 withholding tax. They got 72,000 account. April, 69,710. 10% withholding tax, so they withheld 6,971. They got 62,739 in their bank account. In May, it was 67,000, so 6,700 withholding taxes. So they got 60,300 in their bank account. In June, it was another infrastructure bond. So you see it says IFB, that's infrastructure bond. It was 66,075, no taxes. So they got 66,075 in their bank account. Then it started over. That was 6 months, right? You get paid every 6 months on the bond. So then the money started over and they got a duplicate of all the payments they got in the first half of the year. So that's how a bond ladder works, right? This is the bond ladder from the clients from last year, right? And so that's how their payouts worked. So the only payout that was even close to our target was January and July, right? Which after taxes paid out 54,000, right? And our target is to make sure you get at least 50. So we're always sitting here talking about 50, 50, 50, 50, 50. Now you see the clients never actually get 50. They typically get more, right? But those rates are returning to normal. So when those rates return to normal, they won't even be 50. You know what I mean? So you have to bond ladder while these rates are high, and then you're locked in for the 20 years, right? And then for these, that first bond is 30 years. Now the infrastructure bonds are the bonds that we make exceptions on because they're tax exempt. So that one was only 8.5 years, but that's okay. Our target is 10 years. In March, you can see that bond is 10 years. April, you can see that bond is 15 years. How am I seeing what the bonds are? Oh, it's the last number. So see how it says IFB1 2024 8.5? So that's the infrastructure bond, the first one of that year. It came out in 2024, right? So last year, and it's 8.5 years. So that's how you read the code of the bond. So that last number. So yeah, 15-year bond in April, 25-year bond in May. Now June, was that say in front again? IFB1. IFBs are where we make an exception. So that one's only 6 years, but it's tax exempt, so fine. July is 30 years, right? So again, our target is you have money coming in for 10 years. But again, now look at these bonds, 30 years, 10 years, 15 years, 25 years, right? So, we follow the same structure as really, any solid business where we under promise and over deliver. So our target is 50,000. You can see at no month in the year last year did any of our clients get 50,000. They all got more than 50,000. Our target is 10 years with the exception of infrastructure bonds. And with the exception of infrastructure bonds, only one bond is 10 years. There's two 30 years, a 25-year, and a 15, right? So under promise, over deliver. We promise 10 years, at least 50,000. In some cases, like in February and August, they got almost double the 50,000, right? And 3 times the 10 years. So that's just what happens when you deal with somebody who does good business, right? Who's going to make sure that you get a better outcome than what was promised to you. But that's how the bond ladder works. Make sense? Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's hard to do that. There's a different auction every month. So, like, yes, if we can guarantee, 30 years on each bond, then yeah, I mean, you never have to work again, right? Especially depending on how old you are. You maybe statistically don't got 30 years left, right? So, we would love to be able to do that, but we have no idea. No one has any idea which bonds are coming out when, right? So like last year, those guys got two infrastructure bonds. The year before that, there were three. This year, there's only been one, and we're at the end of the year, so there's only been one, right? Next year, maybe there'll be one again, maybe there'll be three. Nobody knows. So, definitely, at least legitimate companies can't make, guarantees that impossible to know. Same thing. We have no idea when the correction is going to happen and when the interest rates go back down. But what we do know is that if you already have a bond, the interest rates cannot be changed. That's a contract. So that interest rate is with you for the next 30 years, no matter what happens, to any future interest rates. And the interest rate gets paid to you, correct? It's not, you're not paying the interest rate. They're paying the interest rate to you. You are the bank. That's how all bonds work, all government bonds, even corporate bonds. What a bond is you're buying debt. So they owe you. You are the bank, and they are paying you an interest rate. That's how a bond works. Bills are just short term. Bills and bonds work the same way, but bills are a year or less. So there'll be like a 1 year bill, a 6 month bill, and a 90-day bill. So they don't really make a whole lot of money. Sometimes the point of them is transitionary holding, right? So like, let's say you're pulling your money out of one investment and you're getting ready to go into another investment, but it's going to take a year, right? For whatever reason, they're building something, the investment doesn't qualify to go public yet, whatever, right? So if you hold it in your bank account, number one, you'll probably lose money on it due to inflation, but number two, you might have to pay taxes on it, right? So it becomes like almost like a 1031 exchange. You can move it out of whatever investment into a bill, into a 1 year bill, so it's still invested, right? Especially if you pulled the money from like a self-directed IRA or something like that, right? So you can put it into a bill, so it's still in a legitimate investment. It waits for the year. It comes out of the bill with a little tiny bit of like interest payment on top of it, and then you can like move it from the bill into whatever the new investment is. So sometimes it's transitionary like that. Sometimes it's just like almost like a Christmas savings bond type of situation where you buy it in November and it matures next November, and then whatever. So there's different reasons why people choose bills. We don't, though. It doesn't make any sense for us, not for what we're talking about here. But good question. Yeah, they're the same thing. It's just a different time frame, and of course, a different interest. Sometimes the interest is higher, yeah, sometimes because it's so much shorter. So they're not really paying out more per se, like over the life. From the Treasury's point of view, they're not paying out more than a bond, but they are the same, yeah. And they're run by the same, whatever government department is issuing bonds, is they're also issuing bills. It's just that one is short term, one is long term. That's all. You typically always lose. So yes, there's liquidity on the bond. It's called the secondary market. So if you sell a bond, a 20-year bond, before maturity, you sell it on the secondary market, but you typically always lose. Yeah, you don't make money by selling bonds before maturity. Not a good strategy. For all that, just day trade stocks. Like if you're going to be selling things early, then just, I understand that things happen, but typically when things happen, then you take the loss. Like if it's a hospitalization or something and things happen, then you take the loss, right? Same with real estate. Like you might be waiting for your real estate to appreciate in value, but then something happens. Well, now Now you're a motivated seller, right? And you just take the loss. Same thing. Yeah. That is also very, very true. You can take loans against the bonds without selling the bonds. You can put the bonds up as collateral and take a loan against the bond. So you can play the same game like Elon Musk plays with his stocks, where he's taking out bank loans and living off the loans and paying them back and blah 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 blah. You can do that. Probably wouldn't do it at this level because it's like an entry level or whatever. But a lot of people really get, especially right now, they get really into the bonds because they're so good right now. And so until the interest rate drops, they like buy more and more and more and more. So we have like clients that the interest rates got really good in 2023. So between 2023 and now, those folks are actually, they got like four or five ladders, right? So, and different ladders doing different things. Like they have their generational wealth thing for their kids and their grandkids, and the bond payments are going into that and being reinvested, and the really crushing it in that generational wealth account. And then they'll have a business account where the bond payments are actually paying the monthly runway for the business. And then they have their account where they have a beach house out here and it pays all their local monthly bills and all of that stuff for their own personal house. And then they wanted to, ball it up a little bit. So they doubled their passive income by getting another, ladder. So like there's people that have really leaned into it because the rates are just so good. But there has to be only maybe a year or two left on it. That's what we would predict. There's only maybe 2026 it'll last, and then maybe 2027, which is an election year, so they won't try to mess anything up too badly while trying to get reelected. And then by 2028, I think it'll correct. That's just an assumption, but I think by 2028 the bond rates will go back to normal. So we'll see. Maybe we'll get lucky and we'll get a couple additional years out of it because maybe they'll get the World Cup or something like that. And so there'll be some kind of infrastructure program going on where they need to borrow money to do it. You know what I mean? Who knows? But as things stand right now, I think we got about a year left of really good bond rates, maybe two, and then it's over. So if you made it, and if you didn't, you didn't. That's when you become the guy in the barbershop saying, I should have bought Google when it IPO'd. Yeah, definitely that. That's hilarious. There's one of those guys in every barbershop, isn't there? I should have bought Apple when it was at $3. It's sad. Most people are full of regrets. For You got to move, man. You want something you never had, you got to do something you never done. I'm living proof of that. You know what I mean? Definitely moving to Kenya, doing something I never done, and I definitely got something I never had out of it. Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. I'm like, what, an acre and a half from the beach? Like the beach is right over there. I can hear the waves. I don't know if you can hear it in the background, but I can hear the ocean waves from here. So why not? Yeah. A lot of folks do that, Michael. You're right. A lot of folks, they go to Nairobi and roll the dice there. That's cool too. Most of our people aren't leaving New York to go to another New York, which is Nairobi is a lot like New York. So most of our clients, like the clients that resonate with us, they not leaving New York to go to New York. They want to live out by the beach. They want to live in the countryside. They want to live, whatever, but they want to be close to like good hospitals, and they want grocery stores to be around, and stuff of that nature. You know what I mean? So there's a balance there. They're not like out in the bush, but they typically don't want to be in the city either. So there are some, yeah, there are some, but definitely not the majority. Nah, not even close. Like more like maybe 10%. Well, Danny Beach. Danny Beach is definitely number one. Um, we've built houses in where? In Kisi, Nakuru, Kakamega, Kisumu, Eldoret, Naivasha, uh, trying to think, Kinando, um, Oakleafy, um, Watamu. Where else? I know I'm missing like two or three, but yeah, I mean, pretty much anywhere in the country that somebody wants to be. We haven't built anything in Nairobi though. It's really hard to do that. Yeah. It's like that's like saying I'm going to go build a house in New York City, or I'm going to go build a house in Manhattan. Where? Where are you going to build a house at? Right? So, it's difficult to do that. For an average, what's an average home? Give me bedrooms. Don't people ask questions like that all the time. I get it, but you know, don't like, because average home, what average home? An average 5 bedroom, an average 4 bedroom, an average 3 bedroom, and where? At the beach, in the city? Like, what are we talking about? 2 bedroom, 2 bath, or 3 bedroom, 2 bath? All right, cool. We Let me think here. For a 3 bedroom, and it's never, there's always more baths than less baths. So we don't have any 3 bedroom, 2 baths, but we have 3 bedroom, 3.5 baths close to the beach. Perfect. All right. So 3 bedroom, 3.5 bath, close to the beach is typically 170, right? Now, in the end of year special, we're doing a 2 bedroom, 2.5 bath, right? 2 story, close to the beach. It's 185, but it includes everything. So it includes your immigration, with our law firm. It includes the purchase of the land that the house is going to be built on. It includes building the house, from scratch. It includes a trust fund that manages your property and all of that, and it includes the treasury bond waterfall, right? So that gives you 50,000 local currency per month minimum for the next 10 years, so that you don't have to work while you're here, and you have money coming in to cover your basic expenses and all that while you're here, right? So it's 185,000 US, but you come here and you have monthly cash flow for at least 10 years, and then you get that money back, right? You get the money that went into the bonds back. So at the end of, the 10-year period, or whatever period is in between per bond, right? You would get the entire investment of the bond money back, which is at least 6 million. Local currency, not US dollars, right? So the US dollar price is 185,000, and you get everything. You get your immigration process, you get your tax, compliance process by our law firm. We have a licensed law firm here in country. You get including the 10-year bonds. Yes, 6 of them actually, right? So you get all of that wrapped in together. So you move here with passive income from day one, and you're making at least 50,000 a month passive income every month from day one, right? And then, of course, our law firm is on hand to process your dual citizenship 7 years after you get here, while you're still getting that passive income, right? So it's literally the total package. You get a brand new house built from scratch. You own your land. You got the trust fund It's pumping out passive income every single month. Like it's everything, right? The only upgrade that some people upgrade is to buy a car, right? And then if they buy a car through us, we do their driver's license conversion, so they don't have to go back to driving school or anything like that. And we get a brand new car with a 7 year warranty, 200,000 200,000 kilometers warranty, and the whole nine. So you don't have to worry about any of that as well. That's the only real upgrade that people are purchasing with this particular package, or an off-grid upgrade where it's all solar and they don't have an electric bill at all, and blah 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 blah. So it's literally the total package, and so it's inclusive of the 185. So yeah, those two bedroom options were actually perfect, and both of those are the special is in Deani Beach because the price of the land and all of that is built into the special pricing. So you can't choose, which beach you want to be at. But Deani Beach is what, number one beach in Africa, 6 years out of the last 10, not in Kenya, in Africa, right? So big time, tourist area, great beaches, great food, great whatever. The violent crime rate is less than 1%. Like, so safe area, the whole nine. Yep, there are three private hospitals, which are like your American style hospitals, and then the number one maternity hospital in the county. It's called or Kinando Kwetu Hospital. Is literally on the road where your house is at. So there's Deani Beach Hospital, which is a big time private hospital out here that received a bunch of like funding, I believe, from the French embassy or something like that. So Deani Beach is here. That's where my son was born. There's Palm Beach Hospital, which is another big private hospital, American style, laparoscopic surgeries and all of that go on there. There's Aga Khan, which is more of a clinic, but Aga Khan is like one of the biggest private hospitals in all of Kenya. And there's like it's like an Aga Khan like clinic here, and then they refer you to Mombasa, which is the big city, which is only 45 minutes away if you want to go have something done there. Then in Mombasa, there's the Mombasa Hospital, which is the largest private hospital on the coast. Again, 45 minutes away. And there's a bunch of, private international schools here as well. So it's one of those best of both worlds situations where you're in a situation where there's enough, like foreigners coming into the area where the standard of living and the standard of medicine and the standard of education and the standard of grocery stores and all of that stuff is what you expect it to be. And rock. So we always start in Kenya, right? We onboard everyone in Kenya. However, our Kenyan clients can utilize us to do things in other places because of the KYC standard, right? So there's a standard that's quickly becoming an international standard where you can represent people as long as you can prove that you really, really know who they are. So you're not dealing with like terrorists, right? That's what it's for, right? So the KYC standard is becoming international. So yes, we have dealt with people who wanted to, move into Rwanda and do whatever. Those people were typically business people. Rwanda still operates as a communist country, so they can nationalize anything, including your successful business. So most of those people leave Rwanda very quickly because of that. But if you just want to like live there or whatever, I mean, I guess you can't do what we're talking about doing there though. You can't like move there and have passive income paying for everything for you. So it's not set up like that. It's very different though. It's very, very different. The people, you can see the impact of like the communist system, and not from like this American propaganda like communism bad, democracy good. No, it's not like that. But the way they think of everything is very communal. So they think that whatever you got, they should have. They think in communist blocks, like, oh, you live here now, your wealth is our wealth, right? So be prepared for that. I heard that Nairobi is, well, it's a major city. Yeah, so yeah, always growing. The UN just relocated their refugee program, so it's the world headquarters of the UN refugee, program. So that's now completely headquartered out of UN Nairobi and all of that. So yeah, it's always growing. Same as New York. It's growing in like the same way that New York is growing. By the beach, absolutely not. Not by the beach, because it's by the beach, so you're immediately going to pay, you know, beach prices. Now, I'm trying to think the cheapest, which I even hate using that daggone word, because that should not be anyone's mentality when they're moving to another country. But you should be looking for the greatest value, not the cheapest, because you set yourself up for failure. However, to answer the question, I suppose, I want to say the cheapest we've ever done has been like 40 grand out in the bush, and they are not close to good hospitals. So it's one of those things. Which again, that's why that shouldn't, especially for a foreigner. Like it, I guess if your parents are Kenyan and you're returning and there's family and you're going to be close to, okay, fine. But if you're a foreigner and something goes wrong, and because your focus was cheapness, you're out in the middle of nowhere and you have no friends and you have no backup, and now you're trying to get to a good hospital which is 2 hours away, and you don't speak the language. Like, you see how you're setting yourself up for failure when you do stuff like that. It gets real bad real quick. Whereas like where I am and like where we place people, you're not going to have a language issue. You're not going to have a hospital issue. You're not going to have a food issue. You know what I mean? So there's a certain level, like, yes, you can actually go out and find land for like $2,000, but you're not going to have a hospital that you want to go to anywhere near that land, right? You're not even going to have a road, right? You're going to be like driving on rocks in the middle of nowhere to get to that land, right? So it's one of those things where like some people do just focus on like cheap, 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 and like, oh, I found something for $2,000, and then when they get there, it's literally overgrown jungle, 2 3 hours away from any semblance of civilization, and maybe the people who live there are not what we would consider normal, right? There are some like hills have eyes type situations where like when you're out there, like the local people are like, can you speak our language? You can't. You know, and they don't maintain the same concepts as ownership as we do. So like, yeah, you bought everything and you bought everything, fair and square, and you own the title deed and all that, but they don't operate that way. You know what I mean? So that's, to them it's still like, well, you're not part of the tribe, then this ain't your land, then this is the tribe's land, even though you paid for it, right? So it's, don't set yourself up for failure. Either, wait till you can afford it, you know what I mean, but be amongst something you can recognize as normal. How often does that happen with our clients? Never, because we'll just say no to somebody. Like if somebody's hyper fixated on cheap, we're not the right client for, we're not the right firm for you. You're not the right client for us. So for with our clients, never. However, we own a law firm, so because we own the law firm, we get a lot of people that enter into our law firm that were not our clients, that are trying to deal with a problem that they've now created for themselves by trying to do it on their own. So we see the pitfalls of the people who are like, oh, I'm just going to save money, not hire a professional, go do it on my own. And then they end up in these situations like, yeah, they bought a piece of land, but now the tribe is claiming that someone's mom is buried on that land, so it's ancestral land. So like, you know what I mean, and all of that stuff. And maybe they're right. Maybe it was a setup from the jump, because you don't know no different. How can you figure out what the different rules are in land ownership and what happens when, you know, someone's ancestor is buried on the land that you bought and all of that old crazy stuff? Whereas our law firm would have done due diligence, knowing what to look for, and would have found all of that stuff and be like, don't buy this land, right? Because there's an ancestral claim to it, right? And so on and so forth. So we see what the people who think they're saving money by not hiring professionals get themselves into. They typically lose every case because they don't know how to safeguard themselves. And even though they think they're doing due diligence, or they think Chat GPT can do due diligence for them, you know, in a foreign country, and then they end up going back home broke, you know, so they cost themselves everything by trying to save themselves a couple pennies. So we see that all the time on the law firm side. But our clients, we would never even take on a client that thought that way. So our clients never have to deal with anything like that. Well, it helps, right? So like we're talking about the bond laddering and all of that, right? And being able to then enter, you know, and not have to worry about money anymore. You can do that with a company as well. So if you don't have to worry about money, if you got money, passive income coming in that's guaranteed for the next, well, in our case, for the next 30 years, right? And you ain't got to worry about money, then you only pick good clients. Like you only work with your target clients, right? So now if you're strapped and you got to take any old client, then you start setting people up for failure. So that's why there's two of us that are from America that actually do really solid work. You know, one is called Traverse Culture, the other one is us, the Diaspora Freedom Initiative. There's a lot of people out here that are living off of the clients that come through. Like that's how they're sustaining themselves here, right? So they'll take any client and they'll say yes to anything, and they'll just set you up for failure. There was this man, it broke my heart. There was this couple. Where were they from? I think they were from Florida. And one of the other Americans that's out here claiming they do relocation brought this pregnant woman and her boyfriend, who was like a, oh God, what did he do? I'm trying to remember the name of it. It was something like chiropractic, but it wasn't even that. But it was something close to that. That was his job. And he wasn't going too well in the United States. And so mom was pregnant. They think they already had two kids. This woman took their money and relocated them, and talking about they can do border runs every 90 days, which is illegal immigration, right? And had them people stranded at the coast, getting ready to give birth, you know, in Kenya, just to take a couple dollars from them, right? So if that's their focus, and their only way to survive here is off of ridiculous relocations, they're just going to say yes to anything. Versus if someone actually has a system, right, and they're doing, you know, solid work, and they don't need a sale, right, then it's different. They're just going to tell you no, like you're not ready. Go save some more money. Like you can't afford this. You know what I mean? And that's just going to be the end of it. But they won't set you up for failure. So be very careful which so-called professionals you're dealing with. We can vouch for Traverse Culture, which we do not own, right? We can vouch for them. You know, you can go do business with them and not do business with us, and you're going to be okay. And then of course we do what we do. You can come do business with us. We're going to take good care of you. But if there's something, you know, maybe we just don't buy. Maybe you don't like the sound of my voice. It's all good, right? Go work with Kia, right? Traverse Culture, she'll still do okay by you, right? But there are some folks out there, and a lot of them, there's a couple of them that like prey on their own people, in the sense of like they're part of a specific religion, and like all of their clients come from that religion, and they jack up their own people and just leave them, you know, and then they're so embarrassed that they don't come back and talk about it. They just get real quiet, or they start criticizing Kenya as like Kenya itself is a scam, and they don't, you know, they're too embarrassed to say what happened to them. So it sucks. The whole thing just sucks. So just make sure you're dealing with like a solid, you know, a solid relocation firm. Check them out. You know what I mean? Search for lawsuits like that. The particular people I'm talking about, if you search for lawsuits, they pop up, right? Search for lawsuits, look at Better Business Bureau, like check it out. Do the same thing with me. You know what I mean? Check it out. But you'll see that Traverse Culture and us, as far as people from America, like in the diaspora doing this work, there are other people out here, and they typically focus on their own people. Like there's a European company that only bring Europeans, and and all of that. So, but as far as us coming from America in the diaspora, it's only Traverse Culture and me that we would stand behind and put our reputation on the line and say are legitimate relocation specialists. Do they do anything different than we do? Yeah, they do a couple different things than we do. We work with the legal aspect a lot more than them. We do the trust funds and the generational wealth that they don't do at all. And so we have lawyers set up to do all of that stuff. And so we specialize in generational wealth and being able to move here and like bond ladder and not have to work when you get here. That's a specialization of ours and so on and so forth. They specialize in what's it called? Medical tourism. So they specialize in medical tourism. They can absolutely set you up, with all kinds of, medical hookups, especially if you're like VA, if you're like VA service connected. They can do all that paperwork to do like the VA service connected medical stuff out there. They also specialize in like cultural integration stuff, right? So for example, if you go through us, we convert your driver's license. So like you can just come here and drive, right? Like you just get a driver's license, whatever. They send you to driving school, right? So they have like a more cultural, integration type program and so on and so forth. So yeah, we have different, specialities. You never heard anybody big up a competitor before? we don't. We have different target clients. You really don't have competitors, right? So the I think I need both of y'all. You know what? We do share clients sometimes. Yeah, so it does it does work out. So if you on board with us and you need something from them, we'll absolutely do that, right? And so that kind of gets to what I was saying, where like the the older you get in business, the less that really exists. So like think about Facebook. They have WhatsApp. Facebook owns, or Meta owns WhatsApp, right? And they own some like YouTube and all of that stuff, right? Where do they deploy their services? On their competitors' platforms. They compete with Google. They compete with Apple. They deploy Facebook in the Play Store and in the Apple App Store. Are they really competitors like that, right? Like, yes, they're competing in the market, but are they fighting with each other? No, because if you want to use Facebook, then you need to be on Apple or you need to be on Android's platform, to really utilize their mobile apps and their WhatsApps and all of that. So they deploy their proprietary technology on their competitors' platform, right? So the longer you're in business, you realize that ain't really how competition works. Right, it's not. You don't need to be at each other's throats just because you're in the same field. So, and there are quite a few people, like especially like veterans that are getting into like medical stuff and all of that. We send those veterans over there immediately, right, and let them, because they have contracts, proprietary contracts with like big hospitals in Nairobi and all that. Like they are really good at medical tourism, right? But they can't do like what we do with like generational wealth structuring and all of that. So like when we bring people over and then they don't have to work again ever in their life, like they don't have that option. They can't do those things. So it's just about the specialists that we have on our team, right? But yeah, Kristen, you ain't alone. A lot of our clients will do both. We can typically build cheaper than well. So again, I hate to use that word, but what it is we use economies of scale to make construction more cost effective. That's really what it is, right? So as you see, if you go back and you look at our social media platforms, you'll see we just spent a month in China signing new deals with suppliers and all that stuff. They didn't do that, right? So again, it boils down to like the specializations. We can bring in containers of high quality stuff at half the price directly from the manufacturer and build your house, with higher quality, materials than are even available on the local market. Whereas they can't really do that, right? So they focus a lot on like apartments and stuff. So like people who are not owning their house and are living in an apartment, whereas we're Diaspora Freedom Initiative, so we want you to have freedom from bills. We want you to have freedom from paying rent for the rest of your life. We want you to have freedom, from having to work, right? So you come into it and your bonds are paying your cost of living and you don't have to work anymore. Like our focuses are a little bit different, right? And so a lot of people they will bounce back and forth for different aspects. Oh no, that's horrible. I typically see black people fighting each other in every marketplace instead of working together. So that's awesome. I I hear you. It's horrible to say out loud, but I hear you. I appreciate that also. I appreciate the compliment inside there. Yeah, no, I get it. I get it 100%. I get it 100%. Yeah, no, they have a really cool team. I like them. We're in different cities though. Like we're at the coast, so I'm in Diani Beach near Nairobi. So there's a little bit of that too. Like the people who want the big city stuff. Like I said, most of our clients are like, I want to chill at the beach. I done lived in Charlotte or let me see the last couple cities: Charlotte, Murphville, Tennessee, Nashville, Tennessee. Um, let's see, New Orleans, Atlanta. There's always somebody from Atlanta. There's always somebody from the DMV. Um, there's always somebody every year from New York for sure. So like those folks are always like, nope, nope. I've been in the city my entire life. I'm good. Put me at the beach, Now some people are like, I don't like the heat like that. And so the one cool thing about Kenya is even though it's on the equator, right? Elevation controls the weather, right? So you can actually go have a snowball fight on the top of Mount Kenya and then come down to the beach and windsurf in the same day. I loved on Philadelphia and Columbia. I'm good. I hear you. Lived. Okay. I hear you. Yeah. So if you lived in Philly, I also lived in Philly, but I'm from Reading, so I'm from that Philly area. But yeah, yeah. So we're good. We're good. We live at the beach now. I don't know. I don't know. Oh, you're from Philly. Okay, so you know Reading. All right, all right. I lived on Welsh and the Boulevard up in the Northeast, right before we moved to Kenya. That's where we were at. So, and even up there, it ain't like I lived in Strawberry Mansion, but even up there, it was like I don't know when the last time you lived there was, but I lived when them kids went up there and destroyed the Wawa on the boulevard. And yeah, that was like a couple days before we left. We were like, okay, time to go. And like the cops are outside, like watching them vandalize the entire store and steal everything. It was nuts. It was nuts. Which was like right after those kids unalived that homeless man, and it was a little girl who took his life, hitting him with the trash can for no other reason than he was homeless. Philly got out of control. Like it was time to go. Time to go. Your oldest son lives around there. Yeah, I mean it's considered to be one of the nicer parts of Philly, but every now and then, you know. But yeah, definitely. I mean, I lived right next to the Northeast Regional Airport. So I mean, I lived in a half decent, spot. I used to go to the Wawa right by the airport there, not the one that got hit. But yeah, it's definitely a nicer side, but still, you know, just a mess. Yeah, I hear you. Oh, okay, South Carolina. Okay, I can dig it. Yeah, nothing wrong with that. Yeah, but yeah, so yeah, you're definitely the type of client background that we typically get. We get folks like you, lived in Philly, moved away, lived in Atlanta, all of that, and now they're ready to make almost a retirement jump. Like now they're ready to have a soft life, and so they come out here and do that. And it definitely is that. It definitely is the soft life. You feel like you're vicariously living through me for Philly, huh? All right. I haven't even touched the surface. Oh man, Philly's nice though. It's a nice city. It's a nice city, but a lot of it is desensitization. Like you just get desensitized to the nonsense, and then you go from there. But this is completely different. You know what's really interesting is I was an expat for years, right? So I've lived in China as an expat. I've lived in the Philippines as an expat, right? So the difference between an expat and an immigrant is an expat is temporary, right? That's the difference, right? So I lived there, like I lived in China for 2 years, but I knew I was leaving, right? I was an expat. And so it was cool and everything. I enjoyed it. Like I lived in the Philippines. I enjoyed it. Like, I lived all over the place. I lived in London and all that, whatever. But it always as an expat. I lived here as an immigrant. So in my psyche, I'm not going back. And 6 months in, there was this moment of like, holy shit, I'm safe, right? Like there was this moment where like I recognized that I was sitting with my back to the door, which is something I would never do in Philly. I recognized that I didn't know how to get out of the building I was in, like didn't know where the exits are, which again was something I would never do in Philly. And I realized that I wasn't carrying, which again is something I would never do in Philly, right? And all of those things hit like bricks, and I had this like moment. It was almost like a panic attack where it was like, all right, I'm safe. What do I do now? Like it was crazy. Like my body reacted to letting down my guard. Like for the first time, my guard had been let down. My body realized it was let down, and I survived my guard being let down. And it was like a visceral experience, something I can't even describe. And I've lived in other countries where I was just as safe, but because I was an expat and I knew I was going home, I never had that experience. But because this time I was an actual immigrant and I wasn't going home, that experience was one of the most visceral experiences I've ever had in my life. And then people started telling me that I had the same experience, right? Like no one was talking about it until I started mentioning it, and they were like, "Yeah, same thing happened to me." So it's something that a majority of the people who move here permanently end up going through if they're from our community, like the black folks who move here, they end up having that moment. So it's pretty interesting. All right. Still online, have many questions in the meantime. Short thing, ask your questions. Used to live in Colombia and didn't care for them, right? So I moved to the country. Yeah, I hear that. I hear that. Yeah, that's always tough. That's one of the reasons why we really do like Kenya, because the education level is the same, right? The a lot of the social norms are very similar. The language is there, so there's no language curve. There's no business curve, right? So, like the country right next door, Tanzania, huge cultural curve. A lot of people don't speak English, so now there's a language issue, and so it's way harder to get anything done there than it is here. Now, if you're just retiring in a place and you're not getting anything done at all, I guess it kind of doesn't matter. But it's still going to be this difficult to live your everyday life versus having this giant culture shock and huge learning curve, right? So Kenya was great for a lot of our clients in that regard as well. You know what I mean? Especially because sometimes it is someone who's just like retiring. So what do you want to do at 65 years old? You want to learn a new language? You know what I mean? At 65 years old, you want to learn a new cultural standard, you know, and all that. So a lot, especially with a retiree, it's like, no, I just want to go to the beach. I want to go to the beach. I want to go swimming every day. I want to, have a Mai Tai. I want to work on my hobby that I wanted to work on since I was 30 years old and never had the ability to do it. You know what I mean? And so that's, what a lot of those clients want. And Kenya definitely permits that. Whereas some of the other countries around wouldn't really permit that. You would have to immerse yourself in this huge learning curve situation and learn all these new things and learn new food and learn new whatever, which is great, especially for young people. Like it's an adventure, and I get it, and that's cool. I lived that adventure as an expat. I understand, but when you're 65 and you've just retired and you want to finally enjoy your life, sometimes that's not appealing. You know what I mean? So this allowed for the best of both worlds, where both of those clients, the ones who want to go on an adventure and the ones who just want to relax, they're just tired. Both of those folks can coexist here, and not much learning curve to it. So that's always helpful as well. Somebody said they had a ton of questions and they ain't asked one yet. Go ahead and ask your question. Oh, right, but you're on a different live stream. That was somebody on TikTok. You have been asking a ton of questions. You're correct. And you're fast with the keyboard. I'm always like chicken pecking, like. And when I do the voice, it always writes something different than what I said. So, oh, because you're on the Facebook Live, so you're actually using a keyboard. That makes sense. That makes sense. So you're actually watching this on the computer. All right, that makes good sense. I was wondering how you were like. We're live on YouTube, we're live on Facebook, we're live on TikTok, and we're live on Fanbase. Yeah. And we've been live for 2 hours and 17 minutes. TikTok uses the most battery. All of the devices that we're live on were at 100% when we went live 2 hours ago. The TikTok device has 39% battery. The one that's on Fanbase has 56%. The one that's on Facebook Live has 66%. And the one that's on YouTube has 50%. So TikTok uses the most resources to go live. I'm sorry if you've already answered this. I'm sure you have, but I heard something about not having to work. Right. So, in our end of year special, we have something called a bond ladder. That's part of the special. It's included in the special. What the bond ladder does is it buys 6 different bonds over the course of the year after you onboard, right? So it buys 6 different bonds over the course of that year. Those bonds are strategically purchased in such a way that you should get one payment every single month from the 6 bonds, because bonds split their ROI into 2 payments exactly 6 months apart. So 6 bonds equals 12 payments, right? And our target value for those payments might be enough, depending on what you got going on in your own family, to cover you, excuse me, every month without you ever having to work again, right? We target at least 10% return on investment, and we target at least 10 years. There are a couple exceptions to that. The infrastructure bond is the primary exception, right? So infrastructure bonds are tax exempt. So even if they're less than 10 years, we'll typically pick those up because they're typically a really good value, and then go from there, right? So that's typically how people are doing that. Some people, though, are either using that to fund their generational wealth plans, or they're using that to fund their business runway, right? So they might do a business here instead of moving here, and then they don't have to keep putting money into the business because the bonds are putting money into the business for them. Does that answer your question? You said that the six bonds are purchased over the year after you. I'm sure that means onboard. Over the year after you onboard. So what do you do in the meantime? Ah, gotcha. So part of that end of year special is also we build you a brand new house, right? New build, brand new house. We also buy you the land that the house is on, of course, right? So we build you a brand new house that takes 9 months, right? So in the 9 months that we're building the house, and you're typically not here yet, right? Like you typically wait for the house to be built. So in the 9 months that we're building the house, we're also, the trustee actually is also buying those bonds, right? And so by the time all six bonds are purchased in your trust, which the trust is also included, right? So you get an offshore trust fund included. Um, by the time those six bonds are purchased for your trust, your house is typically built, right? So everything kind of finishes together, right? So you get your brand new house is built, your land is done, your immigration documentation is done, where you get your permit that allows you to live over here legally. All of that stuff kind of finishes at the same time. So you get a brand new house, you get your immigration status, your checks start hitting your bank account, you have a bank account, right? All of that stuff kind of hits at exactly the same time. So it's a timing thing, yes. But because it takes us 9 months to build the house, it all kind of coalesces at the same time. Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate it. We think it's pretty awesome too. Was it, it only costs 185,000, right? And so your house is at the beach, right? You can't change where the house is, or we have to change the price, right? So everything has already been done. All the things that are in the house, the fixtures that go into the house, the sinks, the cabinets, and all of that, we already have prices on that from our partners overseas and all of that. And so everything is kind of like a fixed price, which allows us to give that great value. So if you start changing things, it definitely changes the prices. How big is the house? 1,600 square feet. It's actually a little bit bigger than 1,600 square feet. 2 stories, 2 bedrooms, and a office. The office is the same size as the master bedroom, so you could make the first floor office into a third bedroom if you so chose. But it's 2 bedrooms, 2.5 bathroom. Yep, 1,600 square feet. Yep. 950 square feet now. That's where you're living now. Yeah, yeah. Oh, it's a condo, and it costs more than my entire package. Yes, that's typically what we hear from all the clients. So this is a special, of course, but yeah, most of our clients are like, yeah, where I'm at now is smaller, and it cost me 250,000. Yeah. I do remember you saying we can scale. Yeah, I mean, so if you're like, so we had a family that came in that was like a family of 12, right? So the regular target isn't going to cover their monthly expenses. So when you get into your consultation with us, right? Then you can talk to us specifically about like your specific family, what you got going on, how much you think it's going to cost you to live per month, and we can let you know like, okay, if you need to double the amount of bonds, so you get double the coupon. That's been typically people who are scaling up on that. That's typically been the scale they make. They're like, you know what, we want a guarantee of 100,000 a month, not 50,000 a month, right? So we buy double the amount, of the bonds, to be able to do that. And so that typically takes care of anybody. That would take care of like my household, right? And my household has all kind of employees, in and out of my household. So 100,000 a month would cover me, right? So that typically covers every like standard family size. So like, you know, a mom and dad and one kid, a mom with 2 kids, like you know what I mean. Um, I mean, in the house sizes, you could, but it would change the price. right? Because like let's say you went up to, like, we have a 4 bedroom, 4.5 bath, like really really nice house that we already have, our architect has already designed and all of that stuff, right? You could do that, but our pricing is based on like that particular design has 2 kitchens. It has a chef kitchen and it has like your open kitchen, right? So that particular design has more faucets, it has more cabinets, it has obviously more floor space and all of that, right? So that will change the price of the end of year special. Before we announced the end of year special, which I feel like you were around for, we were talking about just pricing like, well, we could just build a house for somebody and do the bond stuff, right? And so that they didn't have to, work or whatever. And in that case, yes, of course, because it's not special pricing. We could not only put you in any house you want to be in, we could put you anywhere you want to be in Kenya. Versus the special, everything is like priced out. That's what brings that price down so low, right? So our the 4 bedroom house I'm talking about by itself, right, is typically $225,000 just to build the house. That's without the bonds. That's without the trust setup. That's without any of that. That's just the house, right? Now, typically, all of the houses include immigration, like because it doesn't. Obviously, if you're coming here, you need the immigration. So we typically always throw that in. But the end of year special is truly that. It's truly an end of year special. So we have like the land already set up, so we know exactly what the land will cost and all of that. Our typical pricing is because we don't have the land yet, right? So once you onboard and you tell us where you want to be, that's when we go hunting for the land, right? With our lawyers and our land agents and all of that, right? And so that's why the pricing is completely different, because there's so much extra work involved in doing all that, with having the agents go out and search everything, and then having the lawyers go out and check the green cards and the title deeds and the origination of the green card, right? Because you can get something that's clean, but the original title deed, the very first person who owned the land, didn't follow the proper procedures to own the land. That title deed is null and void, right? And so there was a case that just happened in Mombasa where a former president, President Moy, right, former president of Kenya, was the one who got the original title deed, and because he was the president, he didn't follow the procedures. He was just like, "Give me this title deed," right? And so he sold it to whoever he sold it to. Those people held the land, no problem. Maybe because he was still president, I don't know, right? And then they sold it to somebody. Those people held the land, no problem. And then they sold it to a third party now, and then the county of Mombasa brought a case against them because they went back and checked, and the original title deed was not processed properly, right? So the title was clean. It wasn't stolen land. It wasn't somebody selling land they didn't own. It wasn't nothing like that. But because the original title deed wasn't created properly, whoever held the title deed in that moment had a title deed that they deemed as, and this went all the way to Supreme Court, and Supreme Court was like, "Yep, the title is not valid because 60 years ago, when that former Kenyan president got this land, he didn't go through the right procedures, right? So your legal team's important to make sure that everything is solid, with your title deed and all of that stuff. So that's a whole different process that costs a whole different amount of money, right? For the special, all of those pieces of land have been processed. We know they're clean. We have the background. You'll actually get that when you get the land. You get the full background on the legal background and all the due diligence we've done. So you'll have that entire due diligence package for yourself, and so on and so forth. So everything's cheaper, right? Which is why it's a special. You know what I mean? But if somebody wants, to go live in Eldoret in a 4 bedroom mini mansion, that's a whole different prospect. But yeah, we could do so in the same size of land that you get in the special. We just put a 6 bedroom, 6.5 bath duplex on that same plot size, right? Which is the 50 by 100 plot size. So like we could still do it. It's just going to change your pricing. Oh yeah, yeah. If that's it, then your increase is going to be way less dramatic, but there'll be an increase. But it'll be way less dramatic. We even had somebody 2 days ago come on. They onboarded and then they wanted double the land. You're right. So again, that increase was way less dramatic than it would have been had they wanted a quarter acre somewhere else. Because most of the land is like right next to each other. So they just got, you know, two plots, but they didn't pay exactly double the price, right? Because they did want double the house, they did want double the land, but they didn't want like double the bonds or double the whatever. So it wasn't like, oh, well, that's just double the price, like you know what I mean? So we were able to. I forget what their increase was, but it wasn't as dramatic as you know. 2,800. Yeah, yeah. So for them, what did they get? It was 30. What was it? 30. 15 and 15 would be 30. It's 16. So it was like 3,200. So they went from the 1,600 square foot to a 3,200 square foot 4 bedroom because they doubled the house. So yeah. Yeah, you could do the same thing. Now they doubled the land. It's up to you whether you want to double the land or not, because it will fit on like the same land size. It'll just be 2 stories. But that's what they did. They doubled the land, doubled the house, and but they kept the same bonds. And of course, the immigration was the same, right? So we're not the price of the immigration, right? So it's not. It's definitely not going to be double the price, but we can figure out what that would be. I don't drink enough. You think I drink a lot of water? I don't drink enough water. I just had kidney stone surgery, right? Which was amazing. I didn't pay anything. Insurance paid for everything. I had the laparoscopic type of procedure thing, so I have no scars or anything like that. It was like a laser surgery. So yeah, that it was great to be able to. Now I can vouch for the medical system out here, but my doctor was like, "You do not drink enough water. Maybe you used to before you moved to the beach, but you sweat now, so you need to drink more water." So they did a lab breakdown of the stone to figure out what it was made out of. He's like, "You need to drink more water. Drink more water and lose 20 pounds." So that's the journey I'm on now. So you think I drink a lot? I drink typically 2 liters during these lives, and I'm supposed to drink 4 liters a day. And for the rest of the day, I don't understand why I can drink 2 liters in 3 hours, and then for the rest of the day, I only drink 1 liter. So I got to do something with my discipline here. I don't know what's going on, but yeah, I know it seems like I drink a lot of water, but I actually don't drink enough. Good call out though. Here we go. That's 1.5. That's 1.5 liters. Haven't gotten to 2 yet, but I'm not at 3 hours yet either. Here it is. This is Mr. 2 liter. Is there kid activities? Yeah. So actually we just took all the kids to like, and so when I say all the kids, I have one. But all my employees, kids and all that. So we just took everybody to a place called Splash Kids. There is a place called Bora Bora, which is it's like a kind of the opposite of a zoo, right? Because nothing is in cages, right? So you can walk around. There's animals all over the place, and you can like feed the giraffes and all of that stuff. There's dolphin safaris, where you can take the kids out and they see the dolphins. There's the safari, so there's that, right? There are like little kids snorkeling adventures. There's hot air balloons. There are like what are they called? There are these like boats that have like a sail on them. It's kind of like kite surfing, but for kids. Like the kids aren't like holding the, you know what I mean? So there's that type of stuff. Bunch of beach stuff for kids. Of course, there's your standard like soccer fields, basketball, tennis, like all of that stuff going on. Golf even. There's a little girl who has like sponsorship. Like she's going places in golf. And so there's a couple different golf courses and all of that. So they have like kid days and like kid clinics and all of that stuff. So there's tons of stuff, you know, for the kids to do. That's one of the reasons why we chose to live here was because we were having, you know, our first kid and all of that, and it didn't make sense to move somewhere that had a higher violent crime rate than I think it's like 0.6% here, so it's less than 1%. So it didn't make sense to like try to go to whatever, like Nairobi. There's like gangs, you know what I mean? Like Nairobi, it's literally like New York, you know what I mean? It's a city, but it still has a less violent crime rate than any U.S. city. But stuff happens there, like you know. So it didn't make sense for us to go there versus living here and just you know raising our kids. Kind of similar to like the way I was raised in Reading. Like Reading was a city too, and you know we had a lot of drive-bys and all of that stuff. But it was close enough to like the Appalachian Trail where like I could go to like Hawk Mountain and like go hiking and stuff like that. And we were allowed to like play until the street lights came on, and you know our parents didn't know where we were. We didn't have no cell phones. Our parents had no clue where we were for most of the day during summer break. But we better get home before the street lights came on, you know. And so, but that still exists here, you know, where the kids could go. They could go play at the beach. They can go play soccer. They can go, you know, play in the woods and all of that. And then come home at a certain time. So it's interesting. And like, you know, when I was young, you know, it was a, you know, you're Miss So and So's son. You know what I mean? You're Mr. So and So's son. Like that was a thing, right? And if you did something crazy, by the time you got home, somebody called your mama on the phone and was like, "I seen him throw that rock, break that window," and the whooping was waiting for you by the time you got home. You know, it's the same thing here. I got friends here that are like legit friends, right? Like, and I don't know their name because we don't call each other by name. We call each other by our children. Right? So like there's people who know me as Baba Marcel and I know Mama Maria, but I don't know what Mama Maria's real name is. I know that she's the mother of the little girl named Maria that I can identify. You know what I mean? So if I see Maria on the side of the road, I can pull over the car and call her mama. I don't know her mama's name. Her mama is Mama Maria, right? So that's a cultural thing that happens here that's super cool from the sense of like the village sense, right? But we actually know whose children belong to whose parents, which is not something that I know in Philly. I might know the kids that are running around the neighborhood, knocking on the doors or whatever, and running, but I don't know where they live. I can't call their mama and be like, "Can you please get your son off my stoop?" You know, right? Those days are gone. So here we still have that, and you don't really have that in Nairobi either. It's New York, right? It's a big city in Kenya, so being out in the cut a little bit allows you to kind of have that environment that you can raise kids in where they can explore the world and they don't have to sit in front of the PlayStation or the Xbox all day. They can actually go out and play and be safe and everybody know whose kid they are. So if somebody grab your kid, you're going to get a phone call right away like, "I just seen your son get grabbed," or you know whatever the case may be. So you still have that kind of village raises a child mentality, which really protects kids, because anybody who has bad intentions knows that they're going to get spotted. People are going to know who they are. Everyone knows whose kid that is, you know, so you can't play the, "Oh, I'm his dad," you know, and you know, snatch the kid and run type of situation. So it's really, really cool to still have that, which I'm sure there are places, but I don't know of anywhere in America where that still exists. So, yes. Yeah. I feel like a lot of us that's all we want because that's what we had, you know, and we look back on our childhood and it was pretty damn good. And now we're like, man, that doesn't exist anywhere anymore. And probably that's why I waited so long. Like I had my son, I was 40, 41, right? 41 during the pregnancy, maybe 42 when he was born, now that I'm thinking about it. So, like, yeah, I waited. It didn't make sense for me to. There was a stat in Philly, I don't know if it's still true, but while I lived there, there was a stat that like every 38 minutes, a kid was unalived. You know, whether it was gang violence or a drive-by or like a whatever, like kids were being taken out every 38 minutes. Like it was crazy. So, why would I want to even roll the dice on that? You know what I mean? Hector, what's going on, man? Is that the Hector I think it is? Yeah, man, what's going on? How you been? Hector, are you still doing real estate? I be trying to include you in deals out here, like very serious deals. Have you retired from real estate? Let me know. I sent a message out to you, but I might not have your current information. I've been away for a while. What kind of deals? Yeah, no, we do have quite a few private deals that we do. We're probably going to start talking about one really really soon. I'm waiting until I finish my dual citizenship, which should be in a month or two here, and then I'll start announcing like some really wild stuff because then we'll open a branch of the company here, instead of having all the local vendors and the company being U.S. It'll still be a U.S. company, but we'll open a local branch once I'm a citizen, and go from there. But we have a really, really, really cool project coming. That's a REIT, right? So it's a real estate investment trust. That'll be on the stock exchange. Probably, I think it takes 2 years after you launch the REIT for it to actually get on the stock exchange and all that. But it'll be one of those deals. So the exit for the initial investors is going to be the IPO, right? So when it goes on the stock exchange, everybody's going to get paid out. That's just the way that works. And so yeah, that's coming. So look for it. Probably Q2 of next year. That's 138 acres, right? That's 138 acres. So keep your eyes open for that. It is coming. You'll be able to get in on the ground floor of that. Read if you are still following me. All right. Any other questions? Any other questions? Ooh, okay. I see the consultations coming in. Thank you guys. We'll talk soon. It is the holiday season. We will talk soon. Any other questions about anything? How do you book the consultation? The link should be in the bio. Should be in the bio. Even if it's just the website in the bio, the first thing you see when you go to the website is going to be the ability to take an assessment or book a consultation. The assessments are free, and our lawyers will send you a report. Typically, 48 business hours they'll send the report, but remember what year it is, okay? So you might get the report in the first week of January there. Yeah, it's a pretty detailed report. It's a pretty detailed report. If you can't do the assessment, I know they're actually adding additional kind of like questions to the assessment to actually make the report even more detailed. So if you can't, just like wait a few hours and come back. It shouldn't take them long to update, but I don't know when IT is going to update, right? Because Yesterday was Christmas. The day before that was Christmas Eve. You know what I mean? So IT's been in and out, in and out. I think they come back tomorrow. So if you're going to do an assessment, maybe wait till after tomorrow, and you'll get a more detailed report back. But it's not going to take them long to update it. It's just holiday season. 'Right. Any other questions? There's a immigration assessment and there's a generational wealth assessment, right? So if your focus is like offshore family trust funds for generational wealth purposes and all of that, do the wealth assessment. If you're trying to like move here or even open a company here, do the immigration assessment. 7 years, 7 years to dual citizenship. Possibly 3 years to permanent residency, depending on how you're going about it. But 7 years to dual citizenship for sure. 'What's the difference between permanent residency and ordinary residency? Good question. Ordinary residency is where you start your path to dual citizenship. So ordinary residency typically doesn't even lead to permanent residency. Anything can lead to permanent residency. It's kind of the easier one to get, so you could do that. But ordinary residency puts you in a direct path to citizenship, right? Permanent residency essentially means you had a permit, you're doing whatever you're doing here, whatever the permit allows you to do, right? And you've been here long enough that the government trusts you because you haven't had any problems since you've been here, and you can now make an application to not have to renew your permit anymore. So now your permit becomes permanent, right? So that's what permanent residency grants you. Still not a citizen though. Right. Yes, it's almost identical to having a green card in the United States. Correct. All right. Any other questions before I wrap it up? Looks like we're good. If you are typing something, just hit enter. If you are about to type something, just press 1. I'll put that in the chat and I will wait for you. If you're not, then I will wrap it up. All right. Looks like no one has any additional questions. Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, anytime. I'm here every day. This time I was here Christmas. This time I'm here every day. Um, so I will see you tomorrow around the same time. I don't even know what I'm talking about tomorrow. I do have like the topic set, but I don't remember what it is, and it's on one of these devices that's live, so I can't look it up. So tomorrow we'll have a different topic. I think it's actually dispelling myths. I think that's what's going on tomorrow. Like there's a bunch of like weird things that people believe that we're going to get rid of, and if you have any weird things that you've heard, we'll go ahead and get rid of those things. So I think that's what's happening tomorrow. And so yeah, we will see you tomorrow at the same time. Um, and if you think of any questions, I'm just taking one more look to see if there's any new questions. If you think of any questions, as soon as we turn off the live, then the question comes to you. You can always just DM it. The answering service will probably answer you because it's holiday season. But you can just DM it and they'll either give you the answer or they'll email it to our team and we'll give you the answer eventually. All right, guys. Thanks for hanging out with me, and we shall see you tomorrow.